Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
I grew up in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But back in 1944, when I was only 4 years old, my father had saved $300. And with the $300, he bought 110 acres of land. My family still own that land today. How many of you remember when you were 4? Now, what happened to the rest of us? It was many, many years ago when we would visit the little town of Troy, visit Montgomery, visit Tuskegee, visit Birmingham. I saw those signs that said white men, colored men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. I would come home and ask my mother, my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, why? And they would say, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way. Don't get in trouble. But one day in 1955, 15 years old, in the 10th grade, I heard about Rosa Parks. I heard the words of Martin Luther King Jr. on our radio. 1957, I met Rosa Parks at the age of 17. In 1958, at the age of 18, I met Martin Luther King Jr., and these two individuals inspired me to get in the way, to get in trouble. So I come here to say to you this morning, on this beautiful campus, with your great education, you must find a way to get in the way. You must find a way to get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. Use your education. You have wonderful teachers, wonderful professors, researchers. Use what you have. Use your learning. Use your tools to help make our country and make our world a better place where no one will be left out or left behind. You can do it, and you must do it. It is your time. In a few short days, we will commemorate what we call the Mississippi Summer Project. For more than 1,000 students from all over America, many from abroad, made a trip to Mississippi to encourage people to register to vote. And the summer night of June 21st, 1964, 3 young men that I knew, 2 whites and 1 African American, Mickey Swerner, Andy Goodman, and James Chaney, went out to investigate the burning of an African American church that was used for voter registration workshop. These 3 young men were detained by the sheriff, taken to jail, taken out of jail, turned over to the Klan, where they were beaten, shot, and killed. And I tell students today, these 3 young men didn't die in Vietnam. They didn't die in the Middle East or Eastern Europe. They didn't die in Africa or Central or South America. They died right here in our own country, trying to help all of our citizens become participants in the democratic process. As young people, you must understand that there are forces that want to take us back to another period. But you must say that we're not going back. We made too much progress and we're going forward. There may be some setbacks, some delays, some disappointment, but you must never, ever give up or give in. You must keep the faith and keep your eyes on the prize. That is your calling, that is your mission, that is your moral obligation, that is your mandate. Get out there and do it. Get in the way. In the final analysis, we all must learn to live together as brothers and sisters. We all live in the same house. And it doesn't matter whether we are black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. It doesn't matter whether we're straight or gay. We are one people, we are one family. We all live in the same house. Be bold. Be courageous. Stand up, speak out, and find a way to create the beloved community, the beloved world, a world of peace, a world that recognizes the dignity of all humankind. Never become bitter, never become hostile, never hate, live in peace. We are one people, and one love. Thank you very much.
You are a light. You are the light. And never let anyone, any force, dampen, dim, or diminish your light. The words of Representative John Lewis, who we saw in this video and in his body of work. Not just was he a light, he remains a light in this country and in this city. Going from being the son of a sharecropper to a son and part architect of the movement, from being beaten to being a lion of justice, from protest to presidential honors, from Selma to being celebrated across this country and right here today after doing what he did best, stirring up some good trouble. Everyone, I welcome you to the Ryman, I welcome you to Nashville, and I welcome you to the celebration of the life of the legend, the icon, the giant, Representative John Lewis. 1 year ago today, we lost him. We know that legacy is when your work lives beyond your life. Because of COVID, we could not come together to celebrate him, but in the spirit of him, we didn't let anything get in the way, and here we find ourselves here today at the Ryman, embarking upon a weekend of celebrations. And that weekend started with the unveiling of the historic marker on Fifth Avenue, and which we'll now be calling Representative John Lewis Way. That unveiling followed by a service last night at First Baptist Church, where his beloved family, Fisk University, came to celebrate, along with many other leaders in the community, a breakfast this morning and dedication of John Lewis Way. And then folks gathered together to do again what he did best: get out in the way and march. And we find ourselves in this moment today. The celebration does not stop there. The memorial does not stop there. There will be a mural in his honor as well at Commerce and Representative John Lewis Way. Because of weather, it is not complete yet, but again, in his spirit, it will be done. And at this moment, we just want to recognize some very important people who are with us today, aside from every single one of you who, because of the doors he opened, we can all be here and all be here together. Al Gore is with us here today. Nashville Mayor John Cooper is with us today. Deputy Mayor Brenda Haywood is with us. And we must recognize, most important here, Lady Z, Madam Z, whatever you call her because we love her so much, Councilwoman Zulfat Swara and the Planning Committee for today. And a special recognition and welcome to the family of Representative John Lewis who are with us today. We've got an amazing program for all of you all that are here and everyone watching from home. And at this time, I want to invite to the stage Fisk University student Jailen Edwards.
Greetings, everyone. I am Jailen Edwards, a senior international business major studying at Fisk University. I recently started a day here in the city of Nashville, Tennessee. I wrote a proclamation to recognize March 12th as Historically Black Colleges and Universities HBCU Day right here in the city of Nashville, Tennessee. I did this to emphasize the importance and relevance of HBCUs, not only in this country, but specifically the 4 HBCUs in Nashville. The contributions that HBCUs have made and continue to make in our city are tremendous, including educating some of our most prominent civil rights leaders, one being Congressman John Lewis. So, when HBCUs succeed, so does the city of Nashville and the entire country. Thank you.
Hey! wouldn't last too long. Oh, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time, long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Yes it will. It's been a long time, a long time, long time coming. Hey, but don't worry about it. Oh, change, a change, a change, a change is gonna come. Gonna come, gonna come, gonna come. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it
Please welcome Fisk University Student Body President, Saraya Ashlee.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the McCray sisters for their lovely performance. Sam Cooke's hopeful words still live on today. Oh my goodness, I feel like I'm in church, so I feel real comfortable. Good morning, everyone. My name is Saraya Ashlee, a rising senior political science major at Fisk University, and I am also the incoming SGA president for this upcoming school year. How blessed are we today to be able to honor such a brilliant man whose vision and love for humanity inspired many. Congressman Lewis came to Nashville in pursuit of higher education, and he first attended American Baptist College here in Nashville, Tennessee. We're honored to have in our presence today people who knew Congressman Lewis extremely well, his family. And with that being said, we would like to welcome Congressman Lewis' brother, Grant Lewis, to the stage.
Good evening. I'm Henry Grant Lewis, the youngest brother of the late Congressman John Lewis. And I think before I get started, I need to introduce my family once again. My wife, Jaretha Lewis, would you stand? My son, Darius Lewis, would you stand, please? And the baby of the Lewis family, Rosa Tanner. My niece, Rhonda Tanner. And her son, I call him Nemo. First of all, I'm from Troy, Alabama, but for some reason this weekend, I feel like I'm a Tennessean. I mean, I was telling my wife and my son, I think it was last night, that I have drove through Nashville so many times, on the way to Detroit to visit family, or Kentucky to a reunion, but it was just driving through. And we have already planned vacation to come back to Nashville. It's been that wonderful. You know, my brother John, as I've said many times, he started this journey so long ago. And he had a vision that he wanted to make things better, not to gain prestige or anything. He used to tell me it wasn't about him. It was all about making a difference, that he wanted the world to be a better place than it was when he came into the world. And I really think, given his entire life to that cause, I really feel he did that. And this celebration really makes me feel that I wasn't the only one that was thinking that, because if you all didn't feel that way, none of this wouldn't have happened. The marking of the street is unreal. I really so proud of the entire committee, and we really want to thank everybody for all the hard work, because I know to put this weekend on, it had to be some hard work. I'm sure there was some setbacks, but somebody kept pushing forward like the congressman did. And I want to tell everybody that property that my brother was saying that our parents purchased back years ago, we still own that property. As a matter of fact, my baby sister and I and my family live on that property. So, my brother John was a very unique person. When he was on the farm, he had bigger dreams, bigger things in his mind he wanted to do, and he put everything in his body towards, reaching those goals. And as a young brother, I learned so much from his drive. He was so straightforward in what he wanted to do, till it helped change my life as a young man. And I really, there's not a day go by when I don't think about him, because of the things I learned from him and what he meant to my family and I. And I just want to thank everybody in Nashville. You have really made Nashville proud, and you made us proud of being a part of the Lewis family. Thank you so much.
Segregation, you just couldn't go into a large department store and take a seat at a lunch counter. You couldn't try on clothing. And we felt it was an affront to our own dignity, to our own worth.
Every Tuesday night, I started attending these nonviolent workshops, and it was there that I met Jim Lawson.
We saw a wrong, and with our bodies, we went into the situation to correct it.
And he kept saying what we could do as students, as young people. He told us all about what Gandhi attempted to do in South Africa. The road plan was conditioning us, preparing us, because we were going to face opposition, possibility of us being beaten. We had to be prepared. The first morning that we went downtown to participate in the sit-ins, I was assigned to go to Woolworth, and we would go in and take our seats, orderly, peaceful, reading a book, writing a paper, all day. And then we would come back the next day, waiting to be served.
There was something deep down within me, moving me, that I could no longer be satisfied or go along with an evil system, that I had to be maladjusted to it. And in spite of all of this, I had to keep loving the people who denied me service.
We had to make the point that sometimes you have to put yourself in harm's way. And in the process, you may stir up some violence, but you would not engage in the violence.
We were attacked. People were beaten, lighted cigarettes put out down people's back, poured ketchup and hot sauce on people. The police officials came in and arrested all of us.
Holding my head high, I felt so free. I felt liberated. I felt like I crossed over.
3 living presidents with us today, we have heard from yet another. To the friends and family of Congressman John Lewis, Rosalind joins me in sending our condolences to all gathered today to mourn the loss of one of our nation's great leaders. Throughout his remarkable life, John has been a blessing to countless people, and we are proud to be among those whose lives he has touched. While his achievements are enjoyed by all Americans, we Georgians know him as our neighbor, friend, and representative. His enormous contributions will continue to be an inspiration for generations to come. Please know that you are in our hearts and prayers during this difficult time. We hope your warm memories and the love and prayers of your family and friends will be of comfort to you in the days ahead. Sincerely, Jimmy Carter.
Please welcome Chancellor, Vanderbilt University, Daniel Diermeier.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Diermeier. I'm the Chancellor of Vanderbilt University. And I'm honored to be here with you today to introduce the Reverend James Lawson. As many of you know, Lawson came to Nashville having studied Mahatma Gandhi's path of nonviolent change in India, or Satyagraha, which translates as holding firm to the truth. After his time in India, Lawson had a fateful meeting with Dr. Martin Luther King at Oberlin, where King urged Lawson to participate in the urgent struggle in the American South. In 1959, when he was a Vanderbilt student at the Divinity School, Reverend Lawson began holding workshops to instruct local college students in the principles of nonviolent change. One of those students was Representative John Lewis. Lewis took Reverend Lawson's teaching to heart, and he soon applied his knowledge to organizing sit-ins at segregated lounge counters not far from where we were today and where we passed by on our march. And in so doing, he helped change the world. Reverend Lawson paid a heavy price for his activism. In 1960, Vanderbilt University expelled him because of his role. The expulsion made national news, and the dean of the Divinity School and many faculty and students left the university in protest. Yet, living his conviction of peace and forgiveness, Reverend Lawson eventually reconciled with Vanderbilt and returned to teach at the very university that expelled him. Today, he is one of our most revered alumni. I am deeply honored to be here with him and with you, representing Vanderbilt 60 years later, as both a marker of how far we have come and how far we have yet to go. Reverend Lawson continues to entreat us to engage with one another in a message of love, not hate, creating an opportunity where we can cherish our common humanity in a time of polarizing polemics. At a time when these virtues and values are often overlooked or deliberately ignored, his message carries more weight than ever, inspiring new students and leaders to follow in his footsteps. Please welcome the Reverend James Lawson.
Well, sisters and brothers, I'm delighted to be in Nashville again and with you, all of you who are gathered here. I appreciate this introduction. To walk these streets briefly as I've done is wonderful. Tennessee is one of my home states since I worked here for 17 years, and all three of our sons were born in Nashville and Memphis. So it's always a great privilege for me to be able to be here in Nashville, and especially on this occasion when we're designing a street as the John Lewis Way. And you have no idea how much I've been impacted by that news and by the various contacts that have been made with me in LA, and therefore results in my being here today. I will try to be quite brief, but I've been asked to present briefly where we came from, Nashville. From 1952, in my studies in college, in my practice of nonviolence, which I did not call it that then. I called it what it meant to follow Jesus. That was my mantra and still is my mantra. But in going to college in '47, I read the autobiography of Gandhi and recognized instantly that while the ancient world did not speak of nonviolence, that's what it was, and adopted his language and began then to continue my study in the United States, Europe, Asia, Africa, on the many different ways that nonviolence has been practiced across the human race, but has been left out of the books. It was not called nonviolence back there, and it was not seen as a eternal intervention to teach the human race who we ought to be and how we ought to live. And I owe that to Gandhi's intervention of 1906 and 1920. And I was planning to work in the South when I finished my graduate degrees. But shaking hands with Martin Luther King Jr. on February the 6th, 1957, where we had those very invisible connections and recognized our call to history and judgment. And Martin King said to me, "Come now, don't wait." So by January of '58, I had moved into Nashville as the Southern Secretary for the Fellowship of Reconciliation. The film is incorrect. Fellowship of Reconciliation, as the Southern Secretary, which meant I became a troubleshooter. I went to many of the places where black folk were taking deep breaths and beginning to flex their muscles, their morality, and their spirit of truth to say, this is the end of it. We're going to stop this vicious system of racism and segregation. Martin King was very much concerned for when the next major campaign would be, and many of us who joined him, Kelly Miller Smith, Andrew White from Nashville, were people who had joined him. And in my travels, I decided that the second major campaign had to take place in Nashville. We had to demonstrate in Nashville the strategic capacities for nonviolent struggle and how they could be used. And so I said this to Kelly Miller Smith and others, and we agreed that we were going to have that campaign that the nation needed to have following up the Montgomery bus boycott. And so we met for 6 months, weekly Saturday morning at different churches, and we decided, and it was the black women who made that decision, for me at least, and for others, that what we had to do was unheard of. And I'll never forget, as we, in June, decided we will desegregate downtown Nashville, I heard the inner voice saying, "Do you know what you've just done?" And how are we going to do this? But the decision was made by some 30 to 60 people who came to the weekly Saturday morning sessions to make the decision, where do we start? Desegregate downtown Nashville. There were some hints that that should become the strategy from elsewhere, including the Montgomery bus boycott. But the Nashville campaign added to the essential NAACP strategy, make racism and segregation and Jim Crow law illegal and unconstitutional, which they did, you see. And so the Nashville campaign then settled the business of a second major strategy, that is to desegregate public life, pull the signs down, change the restrooms to men, women, stop the hostility of every downtown community where black folk shopping for shoes or clothing had no places where they could really sit down and rest their feet. And so that strategy of desegregation became the Nashville target for change. And so as a nonviolent practitioner and organizer and reflector, I planned a basic strategy. We worked for, we rested during the summer, but in the fall we began workshops to prepare ourselves. I do not use the word training. I use the word preparation. We did that from September to December, once a week, and we went through the history and the theory and the practice and the many people of nonviolence and the history of the human race. Actually, we of the human race use more nonviolence than we use violence. For example, if you have been a baby and your parents loved you and they nurtured you in truth and beauty and belonging, they were coaching you and raising you in the essential philosophy behind nonviolence, namely love and compassion and truth. Love is powerful. God gave it to us as the major source of the power of being alive. How we learn to hate, I do not know. But what is at the heart of my philosophy and my understanding of nonviolent struggle is that the great gift of life from creation is also the gift of the powers of love. And if we would stop postponing it, if we would begin to simply use it, as Gandhi said and King insisted, if we would simply recognize the gift of life is the gift of the greatest power of the universe, love, compassion, truth. And if we would allow that to be the ways in which we organized our lives, and most of us do in certain personal ways, but the big task in the 21st century is that we move to let love be the power in which we organize every facet of society. Every facet of society. And I happen to think that that can be done, that hatred can be replaced with love, that violence can be replaced with satyagraha, with truth, with beauty, with the spirit. I happen to think that can happen, and that we can beat our swords into plowshares, our spears into pruning hooks. Nashville, for me, is a wonderful illustration of where this happened before and must continue to happen. Nashville became the model for the desegregation of public life in more than, according to Professor Sekou Franklin, who's been learning about it, in more than 200 cities across the Southeast. This is not to count the cities in the North, New England in the West, but just the cities in the southeastern part of the country, more than 200 in the next 4 to 10 years began the process of desegregation. Now I'm going to do something that I have probably never done before. I want to address my final remarks here at this point to Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee. I haven't had a chance yet to read the screenplay, which a friend of mine has found and made copies of it for me. It's in my study space at home, and I've not had to read it, but it's a screenplay called Tombstone. It is a part of the Western lore. Tombstone, the southeastern part of Arizona, and the life of Wyatt Earp, a historical figure out of the West, and Doc Holliday, and their struggle with the assassination and of two of the brothers, Earp brothers, and the crippling of a third one. And Wyatt Earp forms the posse to go after the cowboys who have done the killing and the assassinations. Wyatt Earp has what was called consumption or lung disease. And in the process of the chase, he gets very sick, so he lands in the Hooker Ranch and is put to bed. And Wyatt, who's going to leave him at the ranch, goes in to talk with him. And Wyatt Earp says, Doc, on the cowboys, why are they so angry? And Doc says, they are angry because they were born to be human. and they don't like being human. Well, why did they hate us so? Comes back Wyatt Earp's question. And Doc Holliday says something like this, which is one of the reasons I'm reading the whole script as soon as I can. He says they have a hole down the middle of their souls. What I want to say to Bill Lee is something like this. I do not know how you were raised. I have no doubt that your parents loved you and greeted you with great joy when you were born. And they sought in every way they knew how to love you. But somehow you have lived in this world and in this state of Tennessee and allowed a hole to move down the middle of your soul. That means you have rejected the fact that you have been birthed by creation to come alive, to be a human being, to be in the design and in the imagination of God. Or if you don't like to use the word God, then say of whatever energy that created this fabulous, extraordinary human species. You have a hole down the middle of your soul. You act like you act because you are moving in the wrong direction of your own life. Now, sisters and brothers, I know that lots of us are too enmeshed in this culture of violence of ours. I think our country, in contradiction to the marvel of 330 million people, our country has become the most violent society known to history. That means that far too many people live not out of their heart, not out of the remarkable gift of life, not out of their souls, not out of their minds, not out of their recognition of their neighbors, but they operate out of that massive hole down the middle of their souls that keeps them acting in contradiction to their own lives. Part of the power that happened in Nashville that brought us to this place where we're naming the John Lewis Way is because some of us are learning to live, learning to love, learning to see our fellow human beings in the human family, and know that what we have seen and what we have heard and what we are feeling must be the way we live and work, because the John Lewis Way is a sign of the new Nashville that is yet emerging. No human being in their right mind should say ever, I'm not going to be alive. I'm not going to be fully human. I'm not going to love. I'm not going to do justice. I'm not to do equality. That is an invitation from eternity to be the daughters and sons of life, of God, of the extraordinary universe in which we live. And in that journey, Bill Lee, you'd be surprised what kind of human you would become.
Please welcome Grammy Award-winning singer and songwriter, Rodney Crowell.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here and a privilege to introduce Colin Linden, who is the band leader for today. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? And how many seas must the white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? And how many times must a cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many years can a mountain exist before it's washed to the sea? Yes, and how many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Yes, and how many times can a man turn his head pretending he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many times must a man look up before he can't see the sky? Yes, and how many years must one man have before he can hear people cry? Yes, and how many deaths will it take till he knows too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Thank you so much for that musical performance. I do want to note also we are now joined by Congressman Jim Cooper, who is with us in the audience. And at this time, I do want to introduce a woman who I call her auntie, you all call her senator. Please welcome Brenda Gilmore.
Thank you very much. And thank Rodney for such a great performance. John Lewis came to Nashville as a student, heard the message of Dr. King, and set out to help right the wrong of social injustice. Though the peaceful sit-ins at Woolworth lunch counter, marches through the streets of Nashville, and continued the pressure of activists, change came. The boy from Troy was bound to a bigger stage. On March 7th, 1965, in Selma, Alabama, the nation learned what we in Nashville already knew, that John Lewis was a man of courage, a man of great faith and commitment to change. Let us all resolve to do good for our neighbors and plant the seeds of justice wherever we go. Let's continue to fight injustice wherever it exists, whether it's at the lunch counter, a bridge, a bathroom sign at a Tennessee classroom. Let's keep getting in good trouble. Today, we're celebrating Representative John Lewis for his decades of service for our nation and his historic work in the city of Nashville. And we're also recognizing the real history of the civil rights movement, our struggles and our successes, the racism and the righteousness. We must learn from our mistakes and misdeeds of the past. As one freedom rider says, we have to keep things going. If one falls and can't keep going, others have to step up and take their place. And as Representative Lewis told us, when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you gotta speak up. You gotta say something. You've got to do something. Change is coming. Thank you.
We came to the apex of the bridge, and down below we saw a sea of blue. Alabama State Troopers. We continue to walk, and we come to that point within hearing distance of the state troopers. And a man identified himself and said, "I am Major John Cloud of the Alabama State Troopers. This is an unlawful march and will not be allowed to continue. I give you 3 minutes to disperse and return to your church." In less than a minute and a half, Major Cloud said, "Troopers, advance." And you saw these men putting on their gas masks. They came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, bullwhips, trampling us with horses, releasing their tear gas. I was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick, and had a concussion at the bridge. That day, I felt like it was the last protest. I felt like I was going to die. I thought I saw death. But Bloody Sunday was a turning point in the history of the civil rights movement.
And now I'd like to introduce someone that many of you already know because he is always busy, stirring up some good trouble. Everyone, please help me welcome Justin Jones.
One day the South will recognize its true heroes. One day the South will recognize its true heroes. And when I look down at these elders in front of me, that's what I see, heroes. Thank you. Today I have the honor of introducing to you one of those heroes, Dr. Catherine Burks-Brooks of Birmingham, Alabama. If you want to read along, you can do that here, but I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about some of our conversation driving up here as a way to introduce her, because you can read for yourself, I think. Dr. Brooks joined the Freedom Rides when she was 21. She joined the movement at 21 when she was a student at Tennessee A&I University. I asked her what inspired you to get involved in the movement as we were driving over here, and she said the story of her grandmother, who she called Mama, who always refused to step into the street when white people came, as she was supposed to do. She said, "My grandmother stood still, and either the white folks moved out the way or we bumped into them. And she told me that I've been bumping into white folks ever since. And so, Miss Catherine, you are a fearless warrior. You are a hero. During the movement, after the bombing of the Greyhound bus in Anniston, when Nashville students resumed the rides, Miss Catherine was one of the students who volunteered for that first bus to go down to Montgomery, but was stopped by the infamous segregationist Bull Connor, or as she told us, as she called him, that old bull. And so, Miss Catherine was on that bus when Bull Connor arrested them and brought them back to the Alabama-Tennessee state line in Ardmore, Tennessee, where we stopped on our way back up here, and put them out and told them to go to that bus train depot, which turned out just to be an empty warehouse in the middle of the night in Giles County, where the Klan was started. But Miss Catherine and those young people made it back to Nashville, and she got back on those buses not too long after, telling Bull Connor, inspired by Western movies, "We'll see you back in Birmingham at high noon." Now, there's so much to say about Miss Catherine, but the last thing I'll say about her is that she knew the risk of what she was doing. In her senior year of college at Tennessee A&I University, she, along with other students, were expelled. In her last year of all the work that she had put in, she was expelled for her involvement in the movement, but regretted nothing, she said. If you look at her mugshot on this picture, you'll see it's a picture that stands out to me because she's smirking. She's smirking in her picture. I think that's a powerful testament in itself. I said, "Miss Catherine, why were you smirking?" She said, "Because I was tired. I was tired and ready to get through." She stayed involved in the movement where she married Paul Brooks, another freedom rider, the late Paul Brooks, and she continued to be involved in the movement thereafter. And now at this point, I'll be quiet and introduce to you one of my heroes, Dr. Catherine Burks-Brooks of Birmingham, Alabama.
Well, I was tired. And I was ready to get in the bed. And I was on my second freedom ride. Thank you. I knew I was going to get the floor, the top bunk. And that's what was on my mind. And with my smirk came on, and they wanted me to take time to make them a picture. Now, he want me to tell you about Bull Connor. How many have heard of Bull Connor? Oh, just about everybody's hand went up. Now, that old bull, when I was coming up, what we used to call him, I still remember the overseer that he had out there to oversee us, Car 45. Car 45. I still remember that. But let me back up. I think they said I had 5 minutes. I'm from Alabama, and it takes me 5 minutes to say my name. All right, let me get to the point. Oh, let me get to the point. The point was that we were having a picnic in Nashville. I must start backing up, and tell you how we became freedom riders. We were having a picnic in Nashville. We had desegregated the things around here. We had been to jail more than 3 or 4 times. And we heard that CORE was gonna give up the ride because they couldn't get a bus driver to drive them out of Birmingham to Montgomery. And so we stopped our picnic and had a meeting. Just like Jim Lawson said, we had a meeting. And decided that the ride must go on. We decided that the ride must go on. We had the money and the will. Now, we had to find out a way we would get the money out of, from the older people, we called them. And we had another meeting. We called a meeting early in the morning. And we know that too many of them wouldn't get up. And so we got our way. We got our money. We voted on it. And how the others got introduced to the bull, skipping on now, is the when the Greyhound bus that we were on entered the state line, the Birmingham line. Bull stopped the bus. And he told Jim Sword and Paul Brooks, my later married Paul Brooks. Okay. Well, I was dating Curtis Murphy at the time. Well, is my 5 minutes up? Okay, let me get on. Paul Brooks and Jim Sword would up front on the bus, and we had agreed that none of us would do anything to get arrested. And they had the nerve enough to be sitting together. And the bull told them to separate, and for Paul Brooks to go to the back, and they refused to separate, and Paul Brooks refused to go to the back. And they were arrested. They were taken off the bus then. Now, the bus came on into Birmingham, and I won't get you involved in what happened to us in Birmingham. But later, the bull came by the jail and told us to put our clothes on, that he was letting us out. Well, I found out that he was taking us back to Nashville. And we had been trained, if you don't want to participate, you go limp. And so I went limp. I stretched out on the floor. And Bull had two of his policemen pick me up and carry me to the car. Now, if you ever see that picture, I have a copy of it. Someone later was working at the Birmingham News, gave me a copy of it. It looked like those cops are helping me get in the car. But no, they had just put me down. They are pushing me in the car. Now, it was a limousine, and I had never been in a limousine. But I didn't let the bull know it. Now, the bull did get in the car. He got next to me. I was on the front seat, the driver, and me and the bull. Now, John Lewis was in the back, Lucretia Collins, and newspaper man from the Birmingham News. When we got to this, the bull and I was talking all the time, but I can't tell you all now. I wish I could, but I would take up another 5 minutes. The bull and I had conversations all the way to the state line, and I was telling the bull off. And when the bull got to the state line, he told the man to stop the car, throw their things out. And they actually tossed our things, went to the trunk of the limousine and tossed our things out. But I told Bull, and they were about to drive off, and I know he heard me. I said, I will see you back in Birmingham. We will see you back in Birmingham by high noon. Now, I watched a lot of Cowboys movies then. And if anything was going to go down, it was going to happen by high noon. Well, I didn't mean to have a shootout. But that, I must go on further. That building that the bull told us and pointed to, that was a train station. Well, that was not a train station. It was a warehouse. And we knew we were in trouble then. But the bull had stopped in a sundown town, not too far from Birmingham, I think it's Trussville, and picked up a preacher. Now, he put him in the back seat of the car we were in. Now, he didn't say anything, the preacher didn't say anything, but I wonder to this day, I always thought that the bull picked him up because he wanted to say that he didn't do anything to us, and he didn't. But when he put us out at that warehouse, and then I thought, well, the trouble to start right now. And so we had another meeting. We had a meeting, and the fellas decided that, yes, they will go and look for a colored community. And they came back, and after about 30 minutes, and they didn't find a colored community. And we decided that we would stay together and walk down the tracks. My mama had always taught me that if some houses are on the railroad track, some colored people are usually on one side and the white is on the other side. And the way you tell the difference is what the houses look like. And we did find some houses, and some people, houses was on the, both sides of the railroad track. We picked a house, and we learned later 6 families, black families, lived in that town. Only 6. And we knocked on the door, talking softly. We wanted to use the phone, and we was telling the man what had happened to us. He was afraid to let him in. My mama had always taught me that you talk to the woman of the house, and she will help you. And I said, y'all, let's wake up his wife. I thought about that. And I could almost hear her now saying, let them children in here. And we got help then. We got help. I'm going to stop there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Look at they're all standing for you.
Madam Catherine, that was more than 5 minutes, but I believe you earned it, okay? We thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you so much. And one sure way to have access to a place is with a key. And there are some folks who are going to forever have access and a key to our city. And for that part of the ceremony, I want to welcome up here a woman whose own name is written in the history books of Nashville. My godmother, your deputy mayor, Madam Brenda Haywood.
I want to defer my 3 minutes to Ms. Brooks because she was just so eloquent and we enjoyed her so much. Could we give her another round of applause? I'm going to be brief because when you think about a eulogy is really how you live your life. So think in terms of every day that you live, you're actually eulogizing yourself. And I want these heroes, these civil rights heroes, to know that you all have already written a dynamic, a beautiful eulogy. And I would be remiss if I didn't share, when I was 8, 9, and 10 years old, and I lived in East Nashville, and a lot of kids my age, they played with dolls or they played outside. Well, my recreation was to watch, because in May I turned 70 years old. So I'm only 11 years younger than, thank you for that. I'm only 11 years younger than John Lewis. And I can remember when the I Have a Dream speech was delivered, and he was the youngest person that day, and he spoke. And I was so enamored and inspired by what I heard, and it launched me into what I considered my purpose, because I wanted to integrate a school. And 2 years later, 3 years later, at the age of 12, along with 3 other young women, I was the first to walk into Stratford School. I integrated that school. I'm very proud. But this is what I need you to know. I need you to know that you all braced your shoulders so people like me could stand on them. And it's unequivocally clear that we have to brace our shoulders for the next generation. So it's personal for me. And I tell you, without any pause, unapologetically, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm so grateful to God that I'm not boo-hooing right now, because I have always looked. Frankie Henry, we taught in the same system at the same time, Rip Patton, and so many of you, Novella Page. I actually taught with Novella Page. And I'm happy today, and I'm proud. And I have my grandson, Chad Haywood. Would you raise your hand? And then I have Ron Johnson, that our mayor, he is our safety coordinator at the mayor's office. I am the deputy mayor, I think that's what I am. But at this time, they told me when I went to Stratford, you're not supposed to be here. You won't even graduate from high school. What are you doing here? I said, I'm here because my daddy said I had every right to be here. And God said that all of us are made in his image, okay? That's why I'm here. So at this time, I went from that little black girl that they said you will not graduate from high school to Mayor Cooper. I served with him for, hi baby girl Linda. I served with Mayor Cooper for 4 years, and after 4 years, he said, I want you to be a part of my campaign, and I want you to be my deputy mayor. I said, but I don't want to do that. I want to get my PhD in pastoral counseling. Mayor Cooper, would you please join me? And me being here today is Mayor Cooper's idea. And we have the keys over here. And I want you to step right over here. Then I want you to just say a word about this is the highest honor that we could bestow, and then they're going to Dr. Rowe, little future Mr. Dr. Rowe, could you please join me? Where are you? Okay, you come up here and stand by me, young man. Future, come on. Okay.
Well, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thank you for our partnership. And I'll be quick. By the power vested in me and with the blessing and authorization of our City Council, it is my great honor on the occasion of John Lewis Way to also recognize our civil rights heroes here in Nashville by the presentation of keys to our city.
Thank you. And at this time, I'm going to call the names, and you all will facilitate. You will get the key and hand it off to them, and then you all will pass them out. But in the meantime, the civil rights heroes that are able and willing to stand, if you will stand up, and we will give you a key. If you will all just stand up. Is that okay? Please stand. All of our civil rights icons, please just stand up. Stand up. Let's give them a round of applause. Okay, first we have Reverend James Lawson. Then we have Catherine Burks-Brooks. We have Gloria McKissick. We have, we have Frederick Leonard. We have Joy Reagan Leonard. Then we have King Hollins. We have Mary Jean Smith. You can applaud. And then we have Novella Page. We have Reverend Troy Merritt. You can applaud. Then we have Terry Henderson, Dr. Charles Kimbrough. We have Miss Frankie Henry. We have Carolyn Bush Reed. We have Vincent Horsley. We have Etta Simpson Ray. That must be class favorite. I don't know. We have Joe Goldthreet. We have Dr. Alan Carson Jr. They can just hand them out. Okay. We have Norma Simpson. And we have a representative for the Honorable Kwame Leo Littler. I'm sure we have Henry Lewis for Representative John Lewis. Then we have Kelly Miller Smith. We have him representing his dad. We have Reverend Dr. Julius Scruggs. We have Marty Tipton here for him. We have John Siegenthaler. We have his son here. We have Elizabeth McClain. We have Paul Brooks. Then on yesterday, the mayor visited Dr. Ernest Rip Patton and presented his. Is that correct? And at this time, we want to remember C.T. Vivian, Jimmy Allen Roof, Zim Zirk, and then Dr. Bernard Lafayette. Okay, now here's what we're going to do. If you don't have the one with your name on it, after the program, we're going to correct it, okay? So hopefully you have your correct one. And we want our audience. We want you to see the keys to the city that the mayor has given out, okay? But I need everyone's attention because I have something that I consider very important. Ms. McKissick, I want you to hear this. Something that I consider very, very important. This is a letter that was sent to Council Lady Z by Diane Nash. And it reads, Dear Councilmember Sora and members of the John Lewis Memorial Committee, it is with great pleasure that I have learned of your intention of awarding me a key to the city of Nashville. I shall be pleased to accept the honor on behalf of myself and the thousands of persons who participated in the nonviolent movement with me. Please present my key to none other than the city's Justin Jones, who none other than Justin Jones, who has agreed to accept it in my absence. And on that note, we'd like to say thank you. We're so proud of your labor of love. That's what I consider what you've done. Thank you.
Please welcome Fisk University Student Body President, Saraya Ashlee.
Again, can we thank all of the civil rights icons of Nashville, please? Because how amazing is it to see them receive the keys to the city? For after 50+ years, the work they did here in this city and beyond is still appreciated today. And we thank them again for their tireless dedication and sacrifice so that we may gather here. Also, in his tireless pursuit of education, Representative Lewis chose to attend, as my classmates and I would like to call, the illustrious Fisk University here in Nashville, Tennessee. Another historically Black university. On the grounds of my beloved Fisk is where Representative Lewis amplified his voice in the Nashville student movement and led the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. The importance of education, equity, and access are some of the foundations of my university, and Representative Lewis exemplified this truth in his walk and his talk. How blessed do I feel to be a student at Fisk today, carrying on the legacy my foremothers and forefathers laid the framework of. I like to know that I and my classmates are the torchbearers of the fires lit during the Civil Rights Movement. For I, as well as other Fisk students, are beyond fortunate to walk the brick paths and sit in the classrooms Representative Lewis led in. This brings me to an imperative piece I wish to leave with all of you today. As my line sister and classmate Jailen lovingly and fervently expressed, historically Black colleges and universities are among the foundation of American history. American legends are educated within their walls, and we thank institutions such as American Baptist College, and Fisk University, and for their ability to educate the change makers of tomorrow, and for giving such a legend as Congressman Lewis his educational footing in the pursuit of climbing higher for this nation. Now we will hear Representative Lewis speak on the importance of education.
Help make this little planet
help make this little piece of real estate available to all humankind? Can we find a way to humanize our institutions, to humanize our political system, to humanize our planet? The late A. Philip Randolph, who was the Dean of Black Leadership during the 60s, said over and over again, maybe our foremothers and our forefathers all came to this great land in different ships, but we all are in the same boat now, that we must look out for each other and care for each other. Dr. King said we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters. If not, we will perish as fools. It doesn't matter whether we are African American, whether we are white, Latino, Asian Americans, or Native American. It doesn't matter whether we are straight or gay. We are one people. We are one family. We all live in the same house, the world house. I plead with you to use your education as a tool, as an instrument to set free our little planet and help to create the beloved community. But we respect the dignity and the worth of every human being. We can do it.
Yes. Those ever-present words still ring in my ear. You must also study and learn the lessons of history. Answers worked out long ago can help you find the solution to the challenges of our time today. Isn't that the truth? We're still learning from the torchbearers of the Civil Rights Movement, and we still carry those lessons with us today. And I hope that we will continue to be forever students so that we can inspire the generation of tomorrow to want to lead for themselves and this nation. It is my honor to introduce President Dr. Forrest Elliott Harris Sr. of American Baptist College and my university's president, Dr. Vann Newkirk of Fisk University.
Thank you so much. One of the things that falls upon my spirit at the moment is to recognize and acknowledge the power, the presence, and love in this room. And I never shall forget this moment. We've heard from the wisdom of James Lawson and all of the others that have spoken about what happened and what is continuing to happen because of the power of love and commitment of persons like Representative John Lewis. I want to somewhat set the record straight. John Lewis came to Nashville to enter then the American Baptist College Theological Seminary. It was while he was in a class of homiletics taught by the Reverend Keller Miller Smith Sr. that he learned of the workshops that was going on here in the city to desegregate downtown Nashville. It was being, for him, a moment that he did not anticipate, but being recruited into those workshops changed the trajectory of his life and sense of calling. And he became a profound student of nonviolence and practiced nonviolence during the lunch counter sit-in movement. I read on yesterday evening that he wrote to the academic dean at the time a letter from Parchman's prison, June 1961, because he could not, along with several others who were in jail with him, attend his own graduation. Think about it a moment. If it had not been for American Baptist Theological Seminary at the time, now American Baptist College, John Lewis may have never shown up in Nashville. But because of that humble place started by Southern Baptist white and National Baptist Convention black, Southern Baptists joining in a kind of paternalistic relationship because they did not want rural clergy attending Louisville Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. So they joined with black Baptists to start a school to train black ministers. But little did they know, and I don't even think National Baptists knew, that the mysterious power and workings of God's providence can use humble places like American Baptist College to change the way people think of themselves, think of their world, and how they can change the world. There's a passage in 2 Kings where it says, the children have come to the point of birth, but there is no strength to deliver them. At that time and in that era, it was the strength of God bringing to birth John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, Bernard Lafayette, and a host of others to be delivered into a new era of justice and change in history. So one of the things I think Nashville needs to know, it owes American Baptist College, it owes Fisk University, it owes them the kind of support, the kind of recognition that if these schools were incubators for people like John Lewis, then these schools need to be incubators for other social justice leaders and training them for the future. Vanderbilt, Belmont, Yale, Harvard, you can call the whole list. But Little American Baptist College has 2 graduates that have been awarded the Medal of Freedom from that little humble place with few seeds and monies and resources. But I'm thankful to God today. Being president of that school for 23 years, the doors are still open. And one last word, there is a preacher in me, but I'm trying to quieten it down. That on that place we call the Holy Hill, there is a treasure there, and that treasure rests in the potential of young people like Justin Jones and others who we need and this nation needs. Systems have been changed because of John Lewis. The system of segregation. And our HBCUs need to be in the business of system change. And I join my colleague, President Vance Newkirk, in doing that in our missions, because systems of oppression are still with us, and systems of oppression will only change when our HBCUs take responsibility for training our students to change them. Thank you so much for this moment.
You know, as a president of Fisk University, the 17th president, the one thing that I always think about when I was a young person, very, very young, and I heard this when I was in church, it said a person's life, a man's life, should be written in song. A man's life should be written in song. And when I think about John Lewis, I think about one song in particular that would fit his life. And that song is America, the version, My Country 'Tis of Thee. And if you listen to the lyrics, I'm going to read a few of the first verse of the song. It says this: My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Now, if we think about that, for many Americans throughout this country's history, this was not true. And through the efforts of John Lewis, it became more of a reality. You heard what I said, more of a reality. And we at Fisk University, we recognize the work of John Lewis, and we hope to continue the work of John Lewis through the new John Lewis Social Justice Center on our campus. When we conceived of reinvigorating the old Race Relations Institute on the campus, we went to Representative John Lewis, and he not only embraced the idea, but he agreed to allow the university to honor him by using his name on the new center. And we want to continue to honor his commitment to the university by continuing his work. And I want to honor his commitment by asking that a representative of his family, I know you were on the campus the other day, I was out in New Orleans stranded trying to get back here because the airlines weren't flying at that day. But I got back and my scooter broke, so I'm hopping around today, but I'm glad to be here. But if a representative of his family could come forward, I know you were there and you toured the campus, but I did have a few items for you because our bookstore was closed on that time, so I brought this for you and I had it picked up this morning, so I hope you can enjoy these items and that these items will allow you to feel what we're trying to do in our new Social Justice Center on campus. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Let me also say, 8 years ago, more than maybe 10, American Baptist College established the John Lewis Julius R. Scruggs Leadership Center on our campus, long before these moments where things are being named in John Lewis's honor. And I joined my colleague, President Newkirk, in the new Institute on Social Justice at Fisk, and we will work together to push forward justice in this city and in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the presidents of these noble institutions. One thing that I definitely held on to that they spoke on was the importance of HBCUs, but also the responsibility of these institutions to make sure that they hold fast and continue to push students in their walls to want to be change makers in their communities. It's not just so much being a change maker on campus, but getting yourself ready to be a change maker in this nation, because Lord knows we need it. But at the end of the day, I'm hopeful in my peers. I'm hopeful for this nation, and I hope that you are hopeful too. So, yeah, I hope you're hopeful too. And so with all of this being said, I would like to introduce, and please help me in introducing, Mr. Grammy Award-winning country artist, Darius Rucker.
Thank y'all. Where do I go? You? People get ready, there's a train a-coming. Don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming. Don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. People get ready for the train of Jordan, picking up passengers coast to coast. Faith is a key to open doors and boredom. There's hope for all, for the love of more. There ain't no room for the hopeless sinners who have hurt all mankind just to save his own. Believe me, have pity on those who chances grow thinner. There ain't no hiding place against the kingdom's throne. So now, people get ready. There's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. Thank you.
And now, please welcome Samar Ali.
Good afternoon. Standing here at the Ryman on one of the busiest streets in America that is now rightfully called John Lewis Way to celebrate the remarkable life of an extraordinary man, John Lewis, we can't help but find ourselves in conversation about democracy, liberty, justice, transformational change, truth and reconciliation, and the pathway to unity. And as we are talking, listening, and feeling here today, all together as a beloved community, we find ourselves reflecting on history, our communal past, our present-day reality, and our dreams for a shared future where all of us belong, and what it will take to realize that together. Moved to tears and called to action is how so many of us feel every time we think about John Lewis's time in Nashville, demanding more from ourselves even today because we know we can and should do better, be better, are better. The injustices that John Lewis sought to erase will forever be a part of this city's, this state's, this country's, and this world's history. We can be proud that Nashville was the breaking ground for these great leaders as they first desegregated this city and then this entire region, teaching lessons about where this country should go and how it could walk into the light. We have so much more to learn from John Lewis's time spent in Nashville, including from the relationship he had with his teacher and his mentor, whom we heard earlier from today and will hear from again, Reverend James Lawson. How they inspired change to systems that authorized cruelty and brutality is important for us to understand. History has shown us time and time again that sometimes it takes tough love to make sure that this great democratic experiment that is the United States moves forward. And we should know that history will repeat itself. It is repeating itself right now, with people all across the country standing up and demanding more of our democracy, more of our neighbors, more of our leaders, and more of each other. And I now have the honor of introducing the most extraordinary American historian of our generation, Mr. John Meacham. Winner of the Pulitzer Prize, his book about John Lewis's life, titled His Truth is Marching On, John Lewis and the Power of Hope, says it all, starting with that title, His Truth is Marching On. Known across the world for being one of the greatest chroniclers and interpreters of the American experience, a friend, mentor, and fellow co-chair of the Project on Unity and American Democracy at Vanderbilt, I want to welcome to the stage, and please join me in welcoming Mr. John Meacham.
Being described as the most extraordinary American historian is like being described as the best restaurant in a hospital. You know, you want to win, but it's not that hard. So thank you, Summer, so much. I was sitting there thinking, yeah, maybe she's just not being fulsome enough. And my mind went back to a moment, it's been about 10 years ago now. I was on the Washington Mall at the National Book Festival, and I was on my way to give my talk at that point about Andrew Jackson. And a woman ran up to me, which doesn't happen enough, or ever, actually. And she said, "Oh my God, it's you." And I said, "Well, yes, you know. Existentially speaking, that's hard to argue with." This is the only time in the history of the Ryman Auditorium, it's because Jim Lawson is here, you can use existential as an adverb. She said, I've loved your books, they've meant so much to me. Will you wait right here? I'm gonna go buy your new book and have you sign it. And I said, yes, ma'am. And I stood there thinking, this is exactly the way the world is supposed to work, right? Hand to God, she brought back John Grisham's latest. No, so, not the best weekend. So whenever I think I'm the most extraordinary anything, I remind myself that somewhere in America there's a woman with a forged copy of The Runaway Jury. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice President, Reverend Lawson, the Lewis family, President Harris, Chancellor Diermeier, all my bosses are here. John Lewis's story, like our common story, begins in a garden. His first memory was of the part of the Lewis family farm in Troy where his mother grew vegetables and flowers. Last summer, in the waning weeks of his noble life, he recalled this. There was a little gate, and when you opened the gate, there was a large bucket that filled with rain, and we used it to water the vegetables and the flowers and the plants. I loved to make things grow. I loved to make things grow. There it all was, even in the beginning. Down the decades, John Lewis would make so much grow. From the rocky, sometimes unforgiving soil of the American nation, he coaxed green shoots of justice, of mercy, and of love. In his hands, and in the hands of James Lawson and Ella Baker and Diane Nash, and so many others, known and unknown, living and dead. In those hands, light came from darkness, possibility from inequality, life from death. I loved to make things grow. His family had called John Lewis Robert. John did not become his common name until he moved here to Nashville, to American Baptist. There's a bit of the biblical in this. Several figures in the story of God's people were renamed as they began different phases of their lives. Abraham, Sarah, Elijah, and Peter were all made new by the commissioning of the Lord, and so was John Robert Lewis. I loved to make things grow. From the holy hill of American Baptist, out of the basement of Clark Memorial, into the downtown district all around us, John Lewis was a peaceful soldier and a religiously inspired understanding of humanity and of America. And he bent history to his will, though he would always insist that it was God's will, not his, that mattered most. No other prominent American represented the harsh realities and the high hopes of the civil rights movement over a longer period of time in public life than John Lewis. No other prominent American bore such steady witness over as many decades to the belief, grounded in Scripture and in the American tradition, that all are in fact created equal. No other prominent American stands as tall, looms as large, or inspires as deeply in the journey toward a more perfect and more just union. The world was one way before John Lewis came out of his mother's garden, and it was another way when he was done a year ago, when he was honored and buried as a statesman of the Republic. Though to be strictly accurate, he was never truly done, and we aren't done either. Democracy and decency and justice are under assault. The vote is under assault. John Lewis would not give up, and in his memory, we won't give up either. Devoted to the ideal of a soul's pilgrimage from sin to redemption, from the wilderness of the world to the kingdom of God, John Lewis walked with the faith that tomorrow could be better than today, and tomorrow would be but prelude to a yet more glorious day after that. To put very complicated matters simply, John Robert Lewis embodied the traits of a Christian saint in the classical sense. In Greek, sainthood is derived from the word which means to set apart or make holy. Generations of believers have held that some human lives are in such unusual harmony with the ideals of the gospel that those lives should be singled out. And one test of a saint, closely tied to the test of a martyr, is the willingness to suffer and to die for others. To suffer and to die to fulfill the commandment to love one another as we love ourselves. To suffer and to die so that justice might run down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. To suffer and to die so that others might live in liberty. To suffer and to die. John Lewis was willing to do just this, not a stone's throw from where we are right now. He did it again and again and again in Nashville, Tennessee, in Rock Hill, South Carolina, in Danville, Virginia, in Cambridge, Maryland, in Parchman Prison in Mississippi, which Faulkner called Destination Doom, in Montgomery and in Birmingham, and in Selma, Alabama. I loved to make things grow. He accomplished something in the skirmishes in our streets and in our cities and in our hearts that links him with the saints of ancient ages, with the revolutionaries of the 18th century, with the abolitionists and the Union soldiers of the 19th, and with you, the warriors for justice in the 21st, with you. In Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural, the new president appealed eloquently but theoretically to the better angels of our nature. John Lewis was a better angel. And the American future hinges to the extent to which we can draw lessons from his example. As John knew in his bones, the struggle unfolds still. No victory short of the coming of the New Jerusalem is ever complete, no progress anything more than provisional. He was a saint, but saints aren't so designated so as to elevate them above the realm of ordinary human experience. We put John Lewis on a pedestal, not to commemorate him in stone or in a street sign, but in order to make him and his living work all the more visible to all of us. I loved to make things grow. I loved to make things grow. That was his first memory. In his last weeks, I asked him whether he ever dreamed about the movement. Yes, he replied. In the twilight, images would come to him in his sleep. And here, in a way, is an element of his final testament. Lewis said this of his dreams. Oh God, yes, I dream about those days. I dream of marching, of singing. I hear the music of the movement in my dreams and the sounds of our feet on the pavement, one after another. I don't have nightmares. I don't relive the beatings in my dreams, at least not that I ever remember. I'm not sure why. Maybe in my mind, the good forces are always at work. There is a power of the mind to believe and think on the higher drama of it, on the higher things of it, the light, not the dark. We truly believed that we were on God's side, and in spite of everything, the beatings, the bombings, the burnings, God's truth would prevail. Sometimes I'll dream of a march, of moving forward, of light and warmth and happiness. And then I'll wake up and think, oh, that was just a dream. But you have to believe that it can be real, that it can be more than a dream.
As Speaker of the House, it is my privilege to bring greetings of the U.S. Congress to this wonderful celebration of the life of our beloved Congressman, John Lewis. I salute John Meacham for helping organize this beautiful tribute, as well as his eloquence in capturing John's life and spirit in his recent book, His Truth is Marching On. I also thank Mayor John Cooper, Deputy Mayor Brenda Haywood, the chair of the Representative John Lewis Way Committee, Solfat Rara, committee member Samar Ali, and State Senator Brenda Gilmore for their hard work. 1 year ago, our nation said goodbye to one of the greatest heroes of American history. John Lewis was a titan of the civil rights movement, among the first of the Freedom Riders, a leader of the March to Montgomery, a disciple of Dr. King. Indeed, his work began here in Nashville, where his peaceful sit-ins helped introduce civil disobedience as a pillar of the movement for justice. For 30 years, he was the conscience of the Congress, lending his powerful voice to advancing and protecting our hard-fought democratic freedoms. And it was a personal honor to join John on the Edmund Pettus Bridge to see the struggle of the movement through his eyes. It is fitting that John Lewis was laid to rest last year in the Capitol upon the same catafalque as President Abraham Lincoln, as the nation first got to know him as he stood in the shadow of the Lincoln Memorial, addressing the March on Washington at just 23 years old. On that historic day, John declared, "Our minds, souls, and hearts cannot rest until freedom and justice exist for all of the people." John made it his mission to defend these bedrock democratic ideals. But right now, our democracy is under unprecedented attack. We must honor him by carrying on his life's work with the For the People Act, of which John wrote the first 300 pages, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. John would always say, "Let's get into good trouble." Let us continue to draw inspiration from his courage, faith, and patriotism, and honor his guidance to form a more perfect union. I'm grateful for the honor of participating in this moving tribute to our beloved John Lewis, who we lost 1 year ago today. I wish I could be with you for this celebration, but I am attending the long-planned christening of the U.S. Navy John Lewis in San Diego, a ship named for him because he was a warrior for freedom. Best wishes for a beautiful celebration, and thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Allison Russell and Daisha McBride.
When the glory comes, it'll be ours, it'll be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory.
Young black girl, big world, bigger dreams. Every day we fighting wars that not everyone can see. Sometimes I pray to heaven, hoping God don't hear me scream. We all play our part, from the eldest to the teens. We want freedom from the mountaintops to Tennessee streets. My people treaded waters that were probably knee deep, and nothing worth having is ever easy. And justice ain't just justice, it's the change that we need. Can't just talk about the peace, you gotta work to get it. Don't just show up at a job, put some purpose in it. Between Ferguson and Selma marching hours through the street. The opposition everywhere, devouring the peace. If you ain't standing up for nothing, you fall for it all. So we stand up to the giants like we never been small. Today we celebrate a soul that affected us all. We give glory to the highest and we answer the call because
When the glory comes, it'll be ours, it'll be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Now the war is not over, victory's not won. We'll fight on till the finish. Then when it's all said and done, we'll say glory, oh glory, yeah, oh, we'll say glory, oh glory, Freedom rider, gone and flown.
they were gone and flown.
Told us all,
You know they told us all.
to carry on.
We gotta carry on, carry on.
Hold that standard.
We gotta hold that standard.
And to bear that torch.
We gotta bear that torch.
We won't be rebuked.
We won't be rebuked.
No, we won't be scorned.
No, we won't be scorned.
The line like a judge.
We got a long arc of justice.
A long arc of
We
peace.
got a long arc of peace.
We tremble.
And we stroke these waters.
Aisha McBride, this incredible band, Darren King on the drum, Allison Russell.
Please welcome Callie Khouri.
Thank you so much for being here today to celebrate this remarkable life and this remarkable man. I would also be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to speak to the Freedom Riders and to Reverend Lawson to say, because of your sacrifice and your commitment, you forged the conscience of a young girl, and I have committed myself to equal rights for all people, so thank you for that. So, thank you. There's an often quoted ancient curse that says, may you live in interesting times. John Lewis did, and now we still do. The second part of the curse is, may you come to the attention of those in authority. And some of you have experienced exactly what that means. And the third part of the curse is, may the gods give you everything you ask for. And that really makes you think. It is our great fortune that in these interesting times, we share this world with people who, in the face of insurmountable and often inexplicable opposition, carry the burden of telling the truth for those of us who may not have the strength, the will, or the courage of saying what needs to be said, no matter how resistant the world may be to hearing it. John Lewis was such a man, a leader, a bearer of our great national burden. He carried on, not without fear, but in spite of it. And he carried us along with him because he knew that it must be done. No matter the cost to himself personally, he persisted in his conviction that only the truth and the reckoning of acknowledging that truth would set us free. Such a man was John Lewis. He so loved the world that he told the truth, no matter how painful, no matter how inconvenient. Our next guest is also such a man, and we are so lucky to have him in our midst today and to have him carrying on with us. So please welcome former Vice President and a dear friend, Al Gore.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that introduction, Callie, and thank you for what you mean to this city. And by the way, your husband, T-Bone Burnett, thank you for organizing this amazing music here today. What a wonderful celebration. All of the musicians, thank you very, very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It is really a deep honor to be here with you to celebrate the memory of such an inspirational and transformative figure, a man I was proud to call my friend, John Lewis. And as a recovering politician, I want to add not friend, real friend. This is an inspiring and wonderful gathering, and what an honor to be in the presence of these civil rights heroes. God bless you all, and thank you for inspiring us with your lives and your hearts. What a privilege to hear from John's mentor, James Lawson, and we're going to hear from him again, and from John's distinguished biographer, Nashville's own John Meacham, who is a master of what he has called the moral utility of history, and from so many others. I want to also acknowledge with gratitude Mayor John Cooper and Deputy Mayor Brenda Hayward and Congressman Jim Cooper and Councilwoman at Large Zulfat Swara. And it was your idea to start to do this, wasn't it, originally? And thank you very much for that. And Senator Gilmore and members of the Lewis family, the organizing committee, and others, thank you so much for asking me to participate. It's hard to believe that it has been a year since his passing, a year to the day. John Lewis was, of course, a towering figure who left his indelible mark on history with the moral clarity and the unbreakable courage with which he lived his life. He was a teacher of justice and of nonviolence. He was a fearless truth teller. He changed hearts. He was a leader, a real leader. And as we reflect on his legacy here today, I also hold in my heart the life and legacy of his brilliant advisor and partner in life, his beloved Lillian, and I want to acknowledge her today. As many have noted already here today, John talked often about how Nashville shaped him, but obviously there's no question that he shaped Nashville, and I want to echo Reverend Lawson in saying this event can be the emergence of a new Nashville. We have work still to do. And John Lewis shaped the lives of so many people who have called Nashville home. I count myself among that group. He was a moral leader and teacher to me throughout my career from before the days I had a career. It was an honor for John to nominate me to be vice president at the 1992 Democratic Convention. I asked him to do that because he's John Lewis. But as many who have joined us today in this historic Ryman know well, the true privilege of knowing John was to be able to collaborate with him and learn from him. Before I ever met him, I felt his impact and that of Reverend Lawson and Kwame Lillard and C.T. Vivian and Diane Nash and so many others, many of them already mentioned, because I was a teenager following the dramatic events on the street now properly named for him, and later on during my time as a reporter for the Nashville Tennessean. Throughout the city and certainly in our newsroom, the topics of racial justice, equality, and nonviolent protest were always front of mind. Our editor, the late John Siegenthaler, are named among the heroes of the civil rights movement, and his son is here. John Siegenthaler was a friend and lifelong admirer of John Lewis. I was not infrequently at dinners with the two of them when John was in town. A decade after the good trouble that began in part here in Nashville, a generation of students, activists, and community leaders were following in John's footsteps, holding sit-ins, as you've heard, all across the South and all across the country, strikes, marching to demand fairness and justice, and the roots of social progress in Nashville took hold in significant measure because of the work of John Lewis and Reverend Lawson and so many others. I'm proud that Nashville has a claim to be one of the real centers of the civil rights movement in the United States of America. We respect Atlanta and some of those other places, but hey, Nashville is where the momentum really gained critical mass, and when they were almost out of gas down in Alabama, there were all the buses that came from Nashville and all the students, and revivified that movement and brought it a second breath. I want to also recall for all of you that you know this, but I want to call it out here. John Lewis was a very skilled legislator in the Congress. He accomplished a great deal on the streets and in the halls of decision-making in Washington, working with him there in the U.S. Capitol, and later when I became vice president, it was always abundantly clear why John earned the title so many gave him, the conscience of Congress. It was almost like John Lewis, the conscience of Congress, is like his full name in Washington, but I would argue that he was even more than that. For those who listen carefully, even those who listened carefully and then were afraid themselves to follow where he led, he was the conscience of the United States of America. He led us, and we still have a ways to go to catch up with him. He saw through the divisive politics and the rhetoric that's long been used to drive us apart, and instead he focused on identifying what unites us as Americans and as human beings. In doing so, he never wavered for standing up what he knew in his heart and soul was true for what is just. He also understood, by the way, with crystal clarity, the moral urgency of protecting the environment and our climate system, protecting our planet's most vulnerable people. He was one of the preeminent leaders in the civil rights movement in broadening the focus to include environmental racism. He believed fiercely that access to clean air and clean water is not a privilege, it is a right. John and I co-sponsored the first Environmental Justice Act, a bill that he championed in the House and I introduced in the Senate on the same day. We were finally able to enact its provisions as an executive order after I left the Senate and went to the White House, and President Clinton signed it as the first major federal action on environmental justice. John was there by our sides in the Oval Office for that signing, and through the various presidencies that followed, he successfully fought to maintain those policies, and they're still in place today. The previous president, I think, didn't find them and overlooked them, but John continued to champion action on the environment and the climate crisis throughout his career because, as he said just a few years ago, and I quote from John, "Each and every one of us must cherish this planet, for it is likely the only home we will ever know." He said, "Combating climate change is not a Democratic or Republican issue. It is the question of preserving this little piece of real estate that we call Earth for generations yet unborn." So anyone who has doubts about the climate crisis, listen to the words of John Lewis. He worked hard on it. Our work toward environmental justice, like the work that John did on so many issues that he championed here in Nashville and across the country, that work is far from complete. But his legacy lives and lives on in the work of those who learned from him and in the work that we have yet to do. I saw that impact on students firsthand when I had the privilege in 2001 of teaching a course with John at Fisk University. He was busy in the Congress but made time to teach. I didn't know what in the heck I was going to do at that point in my life, but I knew I wanted to teach with John. He was always cultivating the next new generation of leaders, inspiring and motivating them to carry on the work of justice and progress that he always had in his heart. He knew the impact of transferring his wisdom and his passion for justice to others. And as he often said, the work of justice is not limited to any one person alone. So as we honor John here in Nashville today, we should all commit ourselves to getting into good trouble and doing it together. We must take inspiration from this generation of leaders who have followed in John's footsteps, just like those who weeks ago fought off the environmental racism of the Byhalia pipeline in Memphis, Tennessee. Congratulations to those grassroots activists. Though our challenges are daunting, as John once said, ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes, and each one of us in every generation must do our part. Now it's time for us to do our part, and I have so much hope in us. And here in Tennessee, we have work to do. We've got to vaccinate people in Tennessee, and we've got to vaccinate teenagers in Tennessee. Given the fact that the death rate from COVID-19 among Black Americans is 3 times as high, it is racist not to vaccinate people. So with John and the many others who have come before us in our heart, let us get to work. And if you doubt for a moment that the political will is lacking, just remember always, political will is itself renewable, and I feel it being renewed here in the Ryman today. Thank you, John Lewis.
We march today for jobs and freedom, but we have nothing to be proud of. Hundreds and thousands of our brothers are not here. but they're receiving starvation wages or no wages at all. Those who have said be patient and wait, we must say that we cannot be patient. We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now. The time will come when we will not confine our marching to Washington. We will march through the South, through the streets of Jackson, through the streets of Danville, through the streets of Cambridge, through the streets of Birmingham. We must say, wake up, America, wake up, for we cannot stop, and we will not and cannot be patient.
Please welcome to the stage Alora Young and Jackie Sims.
This is an ode to the cameraman, for the poet and the pastor and the speeches that redefine legacy. It's the lens that takes history and makes it art, the art that turns wrong into revolution. The gun, the knee, we can never unsee the bodies of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery to Emmett Till, to all the faces painted on every memory. We were wrong. This revolution is live and living color. We are dying in a HD. I had a dream that Black lives went viral and somehow that Twitter set us free. The last 4 years have been etched into the flesh of progress like a burning cross. I can't help but reminisce about all the moments that Martin lost. You see, martyrs, those who die for a cause, we don't often think about their families. His legacy is infinite, but I'm sure Bernice just misses her daddy. Every Black man who dies in the street lies on top of the last 400 years of combat. Call me a hysteric or a heretic, but all I know is I want my God back. My God, not the one who stands hand in hand with MAGA malice, who they say wants us to stop counting ballots, to keep this New Age two-paid Nero in an all-white palace. The only way out of the belly of this beast is through. We keep marching towards a freedom, but freedom's a concept. I don't get where we're marching to. This is an ode to the men who know how to win a war, to the men who take martyrs and make movements human. It's funny how 2020 looks just like 1965. I wonder what wisdom Mr. Lewis would give me if he were still alive, if peace is still the best option, if we are headed towards his vision. Are we going fast enough to stop them? This war is televised. These cameras have put the truth before our nation's eyes. My father taught me that God lies in the darkness as well. The plans of a holy man are often impossible for even him to find. We may never know the future God had woven inside Mr. Lewis's mind, but as we wander blind toward tomorrow, know that there is more in heaven than the roadmap. This is not a poem, it's a playbook. It's laid out in 24 frames. Look, the same stage has made the difference on every battlefield because the camera, I swear, is the weapons victors wield. It's more than shooting or violence. Progress moves in silence that makes it so we can't shake the feeling that change was made to come. In this non-poem lies the markers on our roadmap to freedom because I've shown you where we've come from. Martin made change not because he was made change, but because the same stage holds the ghost of all its past plays. Seeing the future is much the same as seeing the past because my God has made the answers long before we've asked. We have our actors and our cameramen. We have God's script and our stage. Turn on the lights, send the artist and rights, and hope our revolution makes the front page.
That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Oh my goodness. That was absolutely beautiful. Good afternoon. The first thing that I must do is to thank Dr. James Lawson for over a years-long training that actually put me on the path
of both service and sacrifice to my community as an organizer. So I owe him a huge debt of gratitude. He's why I am standing here before you today. So we're celebrating the life of a faithful servant who knew how to get into good trouble. I would strongly recommend to each of you to get into good trouble around the upcoming judicial elections. If you are a person of color in this room, in this audience, and you are paying little to no attention to what happens in our courtrooms, then you're being very foolish. Justice has never been blind to people of color, and we cannot afford to be willfully blind. Individual lives, families, and children's futures can be destroyed by what happens in our courtrooms. Protesting in the streets is important, but equally important is your nonviolent resistance by observing what is happening in our courtrooms today. Right now, hundreds and hundreds of persons are fighting to keep a roof over their heads. And to be fair, there's some really good things happening in our courts with the HOPE program and the Legacy Court. But we have little time left for people who are desperate to keep a roof over their head. As a city, we must do better, especially for the least of these. So I am calling on you to get involved, to show up to the courts, any courts, as a volunteer court watcher. Take notes on what you see and what you hear, and share it with others. You will be glad you did, especially when it comes time to cast your ballot next year for our judicial elections. Thank you.
And now to the stage, RaCarol Woodard.
Oh my goodness. Hello, everyone. Hi. I would like to say good evening, because listen, I'm definitely from small town, and if anybody know about Kojic or any just church, you just want to say good evening, everyone. Good evening out there. I am happy to be here. I am RaCarol Woodard. I am the Community Relations Manager of the Equity Alliance, but AKA the Hope Dealer. Just let you simmer on that. We are the leading statewide grassroots organization determined to build unapologetic, independent Black economic and political power in Tennessee. Founded in 2016, our purpose to educate, empower, and engage Black people of color and working class people to reclaim their voice of power through voting. Now, as Tennesseans, unfortunately, we have the dishonor of being one of the few states exempt from the Section 5 pre-clearance requirement of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which has allowed the state to fly under the radar and gradually erode our democracy. From strict voter ID requirements to archaic 30-day voter registration deadlines, as well as felony disenfranchisement, poll taxes on low and propensity voters, but also college students, citizens with past felony convictions, and elderly. All of this, Tennessee consistently ranks in the bottom 5 states for voter participation, and is the third hardest state to vote in. But yet, the Equity Alliance work of registering over 98,000 voters in 2018. Listen, that was a big deal, but we were targeted by the ill-equipped Secretary of State and elected state officials who would rather complain about the influx of voter registration cards and penalize large-scale voter registration efforts instead of eliminating the barriers to equitable voting standards. This is why the Equity Alliance is committed to championing the interests of our residents, most often overlooked and disregarded, from the music notes from Memphis to Nashville, throughout the mountains and the valleys, from Knoxville to Chattanooga, and every point throughout our 95 counties. We apply innovative approaches to mobilize churches, nightclubs, beauty salons, and barbershop customers, small businesses, even corporations to see voting as an integral key to unlocking the door to improve the quality of Black life and pursuit of happiness, liberty, and definitely justice for all. Our vision is so clear, and our mission moves forward to champion voter registration, community engagement, and voter protection in order to shift the racial demographics and political of the electorate. Now you come follow us as we proudly lead in the light of Representative John R. Lewis. Thank you.
Democracy, the right to vote, is the most powerful non-violent tool we have. Many people marched and protested for the right to vote. Some gave a little blood, and others lost their lives. Some of you have heard me say that the right to vote is precious, almost sacred. In my hearts of hearts, I believe that we should make it simple and convenient for all of our citizens to be part of the democratic process. It should not matter whether you're Black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. We should be able to participate in the democratic process. On March 7, 1965, I gave a little blood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge for the right to vote. Before the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed, some people had to count the number of bubbles in a bar of soap, the number of jelly beans in a jar. And all across America today, when people go out to attempt to vote, they stand in long, immovable lines. That's not right. It's not fair. And it's not just. We can do better, and we must do better. We have a moral obligation, a mission, and a mandate to empower all of the American people, not just a select few. We must do what is right, what is fair, and what is just. Today, our democracy is under attack by forces within and forces abroad. We need to fix it, and fix it now.
And now, Kareen Crayton.
Good afternoon. My name is Kareen Crayton. I'm a lawyer and political scientist who's devoted most of his life to focusing on voting rights and electoral participation, particularly here in the South. In this particular moment, I'm especially proud to be a son of Alabama. I grew up about 50 miles from where Representative Lewis did and his family, and it was one of the great honors of my life to represent Representative Lewis and the Congressional Black Caucus in defending the Voting Rights Act in the United States Supreme Court. I reflected on the first time I met Congressman Lewis. I was a fifth grader on my first trip to Washington, D.C. And I remember the joy in his eyes when seeing a group from Alabama, young people, you've already heard about his love for youth. We had a conversation, and I was intrigued, of course, because you don't grow up in Alabama, certainly Black Alabama, and not know the catechism of civil rights, which includes, of course, John Lewis. And he asked me at the time if I had an opportunity to visit D.C. before. I said, no, we didn't know any members of Congress. And I said at the time, in fact, I don't think we have any Black congressmen in Alabama. This was in the 1980s. And he says, well, you know what? I can be the congressman for you too. And so from about 1986, when he started, until about 1992, when the Voting Rights Act was used to change the districting system in Alabama, he was our congressman, de facto. In Alabama today, though, thankfully, we have a Black member of Congress, Terry Sewell, and she is the principal sponsor of a bill that sits right now in the United States Senate named for John Lewis, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and Advancement Act. And it is lingering in the Senate right now, and it is existing because despite what John Lewis and others did on that bridge in 1965, we had a Supreme Court in 2013 that told us, in essence, that was then. The history that gave rise to the need of the 1965 Voting Rights Act isn't really the world that we inhabit in 2013. We've solved that racism thing. I think many of us in this room, having lived through the last 4 years in particular, know better. And so we have a bill sitting in the United States Senate at present that needs passage to correct some of the wrongs that you just heard the congressman talked about. And the question is, what will we do about it? Unfortunately, I have to report to you the name John R. Lewis isn't going to do the work on its own. It's our job to do that. And you might ask, well, what do we do? Well, I'd say there are three things that the congressman in his life give us very clear directions about what we should do. The first one you've heard many times before: get in the way. Just this week, members in the Congressional Black Caucus and activists sat in the Senate office building protesting the lack of action on the part of the Senate. They got arrested. I suspect that's exactly what John Lewis would have wanted them to do. But there are more things that we can do. We can certainly show up, call our senators. Last I checked, Tennessee has 2 senators, just as Alabama does. Force them to take attention to the fact that there are people in the United States who want action in the United States Senate. Now, you'll hear people say, well, wait a minute, there's this thing called the filibuster, and we've got to deal with that. The concern about Senate rules and procedure didn't really bother people when they placed 2 people on the United States Supreme Court. It should not ever be the case where we have millions of Americans who are facing problems of getting to the polling place that we have Senate rules standing in the way. We have to think seriously about forcing our members of the Senate to do better. And then finally, one of the things that he didn't talk all that much about, but he didn't have to because he showed us. Many of us have to get out and run for something. If we don't like what the people who are elected are doing in the United States Senate, in the city councils of our country, we need to be willing to step up and run for something. We forget the fact that before John Lewis became a United States congressman, he was a councilman from the city of Atlanta. This is the kind of work that we have to do in order to change our country and to make it a more welcoming and open place. Get people in the way, whether you're in an activist position or an elected position, to step up. The last thing I'll say is what Congressman Lewis told us in his 20s on the Lincoln Memorial in 1963. It was a bold statement. He proclaimed at that moment, before he even stepped on that bridge, we will tear down white supremacy in the United States of America. But he didn't stop there. It wasn't just destructive, it needed to be destroyed. But he said, we're going to rebuild this country, and we're going to make it in the image of God and democracy. And by God, I think he meant love, in the same way that Reverend Lawson talked about earlier. We've got to do the work. And I believe this legacy that we're celebrating requires us to do it. So it is my hope that you join me over the course of this summer. Pick up the phone, your email, any way you can, reach out to your elected members and tell them that the job of democracy demands that we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Lee Nash, Ruby Amanfu, Matt Mayer, and Cremaine Booker.
My skin is still making saints out of rebels. My God is still making good trouble. I've grown tired of being so careful about speaking my truth with soft words. Out on the street, I'm fearful, even though inside I know my worth. But I'll never give up, even when it hurts, because love is still turning over tables, and love still makes the blinded eyes see. And there's a healing that's waiting in the water, that's still making saints out of rebels. My God is still making good trouble, good trouble, good trouble. My God is still making good trouble. Even though we are all broken, there is a dream still worth holding. Let's walk towards the fire and push past the fear and call hate a lie, loud and clear. There's a love that's still turning over tables, and a love making blinded eyes see. And there's a healing that's waiting in the water, that's still making saints out of rebels. My God is still making good trouble, good trouble, good trouble. My God is still making good trouble, good trouble, good trouble. My God is still making good trouble. Thank you all.
And now, please welcome to the stage Dr. Andre Churchwell.
Good afternoon. It is afternoon. I want to thank the committee for inviting me to speak at this historic event in the life of our city and country. I am Andre Churchwell, Vice Chancellor of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at Vanderbilt University, as they stated. But let us all recognize that in our lives we inhabit many personae, many jobs, many titles, and identities. Today, importantly today, I stand here and speak to you as a native black Nashvilleian who grew up during the stormy times of the Civil Rights Movement. My recollections of the life and impact of John Lewis and Reverend Lawson come from my late father, Robert Churchwell, the first African-American journalist at a Southern daily newspaper, the Nashville Banner. Writing for the super conservative Banner was a trial of sorts for Dad, as he covered or attempted to cover the civil rights activities occurring in our city during the turbulent 1950s and 60s. Two people he often spoke admiringly of were Reverend James Lawson and John Lewis. At our dinner table, he would remark on the brilliance and courage of Dr. Lawson and his activities to teach nonviolent protest techniques. Similarly, he talked of the unwavering courage of John Lewis as he sustained physical injury in the cause for racial justice. Lastly, as an elementary student at Megg School in Black East Nashville, I recall one morning in class when we were called to sit in our seats to hear an emergency statement from our principal at the time, Mr. J.K. Petway. He did this over the intercom system, if you guys remember those. Mr. Petway told us to look out the window of our classroom and witness our senior class members dressed in their Sunday best, walking down Ramsey Street to Main Street as they made their way across the Victor Memorial Bridge to participate in the sit-ins occurring in downtown Nashville and to likely meet up with pivotal figures there, including the legendary John Lewis. He told us how proud he was of them and requested that we have a moment of prayer to ask the Lord for their safe passage there and back. I still recall the anxiety present in our classroom and the pride, too, that welled up in us as we thought of and watched their courageous act. This story is important because it offers a personal context of the civil rights movement. For you see, we in Nashville witnessed these and other seminal events, changing events. Also for certain, if not for Reverend Lawson and his teachings and the courageous leadership of John Lewis, we would not have seen the success that took place in Nashville in race relations, or for that matter, across this country at that time. To Reverend Lawson and to the late, great John Lewis, we thank you for your lives of service and your shining examples of moral courage that we needed then and even more so now. Thank you.
Equality is so important to me. From the time that I was a young child, growing up in rural Alabama, and I saw those signs that said white men, white women, colored women, I dreamed that the day would come when I would stand up and speak out against discrimination. We're one people, we're one family, we all live in the same house. We must respect the dignity and the worth of every human being. It is a must that we do what is right, what is fair, and what is just. This is the time to pass the Equality Act. We need it to set all of our people free.
Please help me welcome to the stage Ashlee Davis.
Good afternoon. Let all God's children say amen. Amen. Surely he's worthy to be praised on a day like this. During my final year of law school at Howard University, I received an invitation from my then employer to go to a private event at the Willard Hotel, just a few steps from the White House. And the featured speaker that evening was none other than Representative Lewis. I remember the mix of nerves and excitement I had, knowing that I would soon be in the same room as Representative John Lewis. I made a promise to myself, in fact. I said, if I get the chance to meet this man, I'm not gonna spoil it. And I got my chance. Dressed for the event in a full suit and tie like I am today, one of my senior managers walked me over to Representative Lewis, and he turned around and looked right at me, and he smiled warmly. Realizing the moment was fleeting, I shared with him right away what I know to be two of my greatest personal attributes beyond being a child of God and the daughter of Michael and Vanessa Davis. I said, Representative Lewis, Brother Lewis, I am from Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm your soror. Being a Sigma man, and therefore my brother, the Honorable Brother Lewis, gave me a big hug, and he told me just how much Nashville means to him. I said, I absolutely agree, sir, and I also shared with him that I accepted my call to the ministry at an early age as well. We embraced one last time, and before I departed and I walked out of that hotel, I remember this sense and this feeling of both pride and gratitude for that moment. See, what I didn't know is that just a year later, my address of employment would be 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue when I began my 6 years of service in the Obama administration. And we worked long hours thanks to the trust that the American public gave to us. And I went home late at night, but I would walk past that Willard Hotel and I would remember that feeling I had that evening. From Brother Lewis, I learned the professional titles, honorifics, how many languages you speak, how high your tax bracket is. None of it eclipses the power and the strength of ordinary people with extraordinary vision. Because collectively, he told us that we will redeem the soul of America by getting into what we know now, good and necessary trouble. In fact, I believe that we should be able to count off our good and necessary trouble assignments as easy as we do our birthday. It's that important because in a time when our most valuable nonviolent tool, the right to vote, is being stripped away, no longer in the still of night, but with unabashed and willful intent, we just can't help it anymore. We have to get in that good and necessary trouble. In fact, we owe it not simply to Brother Lewis's memory, but also to those who follow behind us. They're depending on us to get into trouble. And we can't be fooled by pleasantries for those that want you to feel ashamed for calling out what is so clearly wrong. We've seen their tactics, their attempts to use euphemisms for systemic racism, police brutality, bigotry, homophobia, and xenophobia. When they can't stand to look in the mirror and accept the facts of our nation's history, Brother Lewis taught us that, look what they're doing. They're giving boogeyman characteristics to this so-called monster under the bed and naming it critical race theory. And they've even gone so far in our own state of Tennessee to make it illegal to teach our children the true history of our nation. And we know what happens when you're not cognizant of your history. You are indeed doomed to repeat it. And we can't be fooled by their request for us to go along to get along, because we can't afford the cost of pleasantries as black and brown bodies are killed at the hands of those who have sworn to protect them, when the aptitude of a child is determined by the zip code of their origin, when trans brothers and sisters are being killed and denied of their human dignity, when our Muslim and Asian brothers and sisters face hateful rhetoric and actions just going about their daily lives, when a woman's body is seen as a space where we feel it appropriate to legislate her decisions, when a mob of terrorists, y'all, when they stage an insurrection before our very eyes, we simply don't have time anymore to not get into good and necessary trouble. On the anniversary of the homecoming of my brother, so many are in this room, my brother, Brother Lewis, we celebrate his incredible life with the dedication of Representative John Lewis Way in a prominent space in our beautiful city. But our work is not done just because the street sign has been unveiled and the commemorations are near an end, because Dr. King was right. The arc of the moral universe is indeed long, but thank God that arc bends towards justice. And I believe that if we act fervently and with intention, it bends on a curve called equity. Change isn't easy, y'all. We know it because we also know it's not a light switch effect, but we have ancestors that knew this was true and they saw beyond those cotton fields. So why should we hang our heads in this moment and give up into defeat as inequity tries to run rampant in our communities? We know the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice on the curve called equity, because that's the only reason the fourth great-grandchild of formerly enslaved people, a child born in North Nashville to two incredible parents with blue-collar jobs, can now have a job at the top floor of a multinational investment firm, a company now with a street address of John Lewis Way. See, the only reason I'm able to sit at that desk on that top floor is because of the good and necessary trouble Brother Lewis got into on my behalf and on the behalf of all of us here today. The kind of good trouble Brother Lewis wants us to get into, by the way, isn't just a 28-day assignment in February, a 30-day one in June. This is the type of good trouble that requires a daily commitment because it is indispensable to our longevity as a human race. How strong we are and how far we go against the adversities facing us will be determined not by what we do individually, but rather collectively. I am so honored and thankful for the opportunity to contribute to the celebration of Brother Lewis's life and to contribute and talk about what we're going to get into together. And I look forward to walking with my head high down John Lewis Way as I venture to my next good trouble assignment. Amen.
We've got just a few more treats for you all as we come to the end of our program. We're slowly making our way there, but we've got just another gift that we want to share with you, and that comes from Caroline Randall Williams.
Good afternoon. I cannot tell you what an honor it is to me to get to share this space with all of y'all today. I am a Nashville daughter, born and raised. I was born in this city. My grandfather was a civil rights attorney here, and he had the privilege of, along with the Alexander Luby, bailing Congressman Lewis and Diane Nash and Reverend Lawson out of prison when they sat down at the counters at Woolworth to insist that we all deserve the same rights under the law and the freedoms of the United States. And I am so proud to be in my hometown sharing a poem that I've written for Congressman Lewis on this seismic day. It's called Chicken Scratch, an elegy for John Lewis in 2 parts. Part 1, Heartbroke. Was his body a boat we hoped would take us to shore? Did we count too much on one conscience to do the work? Lord, let his will and effort be enough. Let us find the words to carry on. We have stepped where he stepped and been better for it. Wished what he wished and been lifted up. And yet and still, this slow drag, this sad white shuffle toward change. Lord, just think of him fighting to make room for more love. Well, we didn't deserve him. Look at this place. Lord, where our imagination has failed, let us look up and out again. Where our determination has flagged, let us gather us up again. A good man is gone, but his dreams, our dreams, his will, our will, and we, unlike to see his like again, must serve his memory by making good the promise of it. Part 2, ready. So, when I said good, did you know I meant whole? Did you know I meant plans that work, backs that don't break, words with enough weight to get things done? Can you see me, a little boy? Can you see your little boy? You can't see your little boy, can you? Little and boyish and talking to chickens, hoping for a different kind of truth No, preaching a better kind of truth and hoping for this place to know two real things at once and stand them. And Lord, it has come gradually. This freedom, this patience, this bridge breaching thing. Do we call it hope? No. We call it trouble. We call it delay in the cut behind the thick smoke. We call it the ceaseless breath beneath the knee. We call it what's always been. We call it what's owed now. We call it what's next. What's next? What's next? Thank y'all.
I was one of the 13 original Freedom Riders. We were on a bus ride from Washington to New Orleans, trying to test a recent Supreme Court ruling that banned racial discrimination on buses crossing state line. We tested the waiting room, restroom facility. We traveled to Rock Hill, South Carolina, about 25 miles from here. When my seatmate Albert Bigelow and I tried to enter a white waiting room, we were met by an angry mob that beat us and left us lying in a pool of blood. Years ago, a man from Rock Hill, inspired by President Obama's election, decided to come forward. He came to my office in Washington and said, "I am one of the people who beat you. I want to apologize. Will you forgive me?" I said, "I accept your apology." He started crying. He gave me a hug. I hugged him back, and we both started crying. This man and I don't want to go back. We don't want to go back.
The next person I'm going to introduce you to, many of you all have already heard his name and heard his voice, and I've had the pleasure here recently to know him and to meet him and his beautiful and amazing wife, who I swear I was her in another life. Seriously, she's an amazing spirit, amazing force and power. But now I would like to invite to the stage Michael Eric Dyson.
What an honor it is to be here today to celebrate the magnificent legacy of a great man. When John Lewis and I first interacted, it was not an auspicious occasion. I'd written a book about Dr. King, and he took offense at the parallel I drew between Martin Luther King Jr. and a younger generation of hip-hop artists. He said in the press that he was offended that Dyson would draw a relationship between King and Snoop Doggy Dogg. And when they came to me to ask me my response, I said, "I am honored that John Lewis knows my name. And when we get the chance to talk, I will lay out for him what I meant by that. And when I met him, I did. I said, Congressman Lewis, what I meant is not that Tupac was Dr. King or Biggie. I said, but they're hurt and pain, the trauma that they articulated, the grief that they expressed is deeply entrenched in the lyrical magnificence and the rhetorical imagination that they conjured. So when Tupac said, just the other day I got lynched by some crooked cops, and to this day, them same cops on the beat getting major pay. But when I get my check, they taking tax out, so we paying the cops to knock the blacks out. He said, And I said, Biggie said, I used to fuss when the landlord dissed us. No heat, wondered why Christmas missed us. Birthdays was the worst days, now we sip champagne when we thirsty. Darn right I like the life I live, cause I went from negative to positive. And so he then understood. But what I understood about him is that he was a man of tremendous word, but even better spirit. He was a man of extraordinary commitment to the truth of this democratic experiment in America. And he was determined to move forward with the majestic wind of hope beneath his wings. And so, my brothers and sisters, I want to read to you his last words. And I'm reminded of that story, apocryphal or not, of a priest celebrating 50 years of ordination. And so he invited his dear friend Richard Burton to read the 23rd Psalm. And Richard Burton, of course, read it with magnificent eloquence, and people applauded for 2 minutes. And then the priest himself read the psalm, and people were hushed to an awe. And somebody behind Mr. Burton said, why is it that when you read the words, there was extraordinary applause, but when the priest read them, there was an extraordinary calm and hush? He said, well, I knew the psalm, he knew the shepherd. And so John Lewis may not have possessed the hair of a Adam Clayton Powell, nor his lighter skin. He may not have possessed the grandiloquence of many rhetorical masters who dotted the landscape of this fight for equality. He may not have possessed even the philosophical acuity of a Jim Lawson, who was able to theoretically deconstruct the concepts of nonviolence, but what he did possess was an acknowledged relationship to a higher power that allowed him to be a vessel and a vehicle for truth, hope, and justice. And so, his final words. While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. Millions of people motivated simply by human compassion laid down the burdens of division. Around the country and the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity. That is why I had to visit Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, though I was admitted to the hospital the following day. I just had to see and feel it for myself that after many years of silent witness, the truth is still marching on. Emmett Till was my George Floyd. He was my Rayshard Brooks, Sandra Bland, and Breonna Taylor. He was 14 when he was killed, and I was only 15 years old at the time. I will never, ever forget the moment when it became so clear that he could easily have been me. In those days, fear constrained us like an imaginary prison, and troubling thoughts of potential brutality committed for no understandable reason were the bars. Though I was surrounded by two loving parents, plenty of brothers, sisters, and cousins, their love could not protect me from the unholy oppression waiting just outside that family circle. Unchecked, unrestrained violence and government-sanctioned terror had the power to turn a simple stroll to the store for some Skittles or an innocent morning jog down a lonesome country road into a nightmare. If we are to survive as one unified nation, we must discover what so readily takes root in our hearts that could rob Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina of her brightest and best, shoot unwitting concert goers in Las Vegas, and choke to death the hopes and dreams of a gifted violinist like Elijah McClain. Like so many young people today, I was searching for a way out, or some might say a way in, and then I heard the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on an old radio. He was talking about the philosophy and discipline of nonviolence. He said, we are all complicit when we tolerate injustice. He said, it is not enough to say it will get better by and by. He said, each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state, it is an act. And each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. You must also study and learn the lessons of history because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching, existential struggle for a very long time. People on every continent have stood in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change, and that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of your time. Continue to build union between movements stretching across the globe because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence is the more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide.
Please welcome Metro Council at Large, Zulfat Suara.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. It's been a long day, so I'm not going to make a long speech. In my faith tradition, the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad said, if you're not grateful to people, you will not be grateful to God. So all I want to do at this point in the program is to thank you all. I want to thank the Lewis's family for being here and spending the weekend with us. I want to thank our civil rights icon. I said it at the beginning of the weekend. If it is not for all of you, I would not be standing here as the first Muslim woman elected in the state of Tennessee. And the incredible honor of being the first Nigerian woman elected to any office in the United States. So thank you. Thank you for all that you did. And a lot is being said. I want to thank the committee. They're all listed in your program. From the main committee to the mural committee to the memorial committee, thank you all for all that you did. I want to thank T-Bone and Callie for the production and the talent, for Colin Linden, And I have to thank Paul Winston, our executive producer. I want to make sure that I thank Samar Ali and Remzia Suleiman. And I know there's so many people that I'm missing that I have not mentioned, but thank you all. When we set out a year ago to do this, we had a couple of things in mind. We wanted to rename the street. We've done that. We wanted to honor John Lewis with a weekend. We've done that. We wanted to honor our civil rights icon and give them keys to our city. We did that. We wanted to remind the world Nashville's role and Nashville's place in the civil rights movement. And I would think this weekend, with all the talent, with all the speeches, with all the stories, I think the world knows what we did. We wanted unity, because that's what Lewis stood for. And we did that. When you look at the throes of people this weekend, it was not just one side, one color, one race, one ethnicity, one gender, one sexual orientation. It was all of us coming together. So, what have we not done? And that's the what's next. We wanted the sign to be a reminder that every time everyone looks at it, it reminds them of what Lewis did and motivates us to go and do what is next. And there's no better person to give us that charge, to tell us how to do it, to tell us what we need to do, to help us. We don't want to come back in 60 years talking about the same issues that were spoken about 60 years ago. We want to make sure that Black Nashville history is celebrated every day. We want to make sure that we recognize and support our HBCUs. We want to make sure that these places that give us all these giants, that we always, always recognize them. So, no better person to do that. He did it many years ago, 60 years ago. He taught those legends, put them on the streets, and they changed the world. And ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to reintroduce to you the legend James Lewis, that I'm so honored and proud to be in the same room with to give us our final words. Thank you. And I think I got so excited. I put James and I put Lewis, and I think it's because they're both heroes to me, and I've said those two names many times this weekend. So please, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to reintroduce to you Reverend James Lawson.
Well, sisters and brothers, it's been a great afternoon, but it has also been a long afternoon. But with the music and the wonderful speeches that have been made, I hope we can leave this place with the notion that we have a lot of work yet to do. We've had a lot of people who have gone before us who have been great and wondrous people. They've made our country a far better country than it was 50 or 100 years ago. They've helped to wake up more of us than ever before. At no time in my 92 years have we had some of the issues on the pages of the newspapers and over the airways and the talk shows that we have now. True enough, some of those issues are being spoken of by people who do have a hole down the middle of the soul. I maintain that, which means that they must close the hole in their soul before they can really help our nation move in the right direction. Do not be deceived by them. They need to know that many of us are watching them, and they do not deceive us. We who have gathered here this afternoon represent the long struggle of the human race to rise up to the full height and length of what it means to be, by God's grace, by the grace of the universe, to be a living species, alive, and in the image of the life that has created us. So it has been a very long day, but I want to simply say to you that it is important for each of us to let this day rest in our hearts and move us to continue who we are and to begin to continue to go in the right direction, to be who you are. A poet once wrote, and capable of becoming who you are becoming, and to be what you are, and capable of becoming what you are becoming, is the single role or purpose of life. So to have this struggle continue on, it requires each of us to recommit ourselves to the task of living to the full, which means loving to the full, which means seeing all of ourselves in one another. And that's a monumental task in the United States. I don't know if any nation has had such a giant task before. When 57 million people, 81 million people in 2020 vote for a incompetent human being to become the President of the United States, we are in massive trouble. I did not study the former president, but by being alert, I read bits and pieces about him in New York and in Chicago and in Los Angeles. I read pieces about him in the penthouse clubs in LA, where I now live. And I have to say to you, my fellow human beings who raised him to the life of being president of our 330 million people, are in many ways people with holes down the middle of their souls. That's a monumental task, but that's why nonviolent compassion, nonviolent love, nonviolent tactics and struggle is the way that we can give them the space to be reformed and transformed into the image of eternity while they're yet alive. There is no other way. Even if we see them as enemies, which many do, Jesus said, love your enemies. By that he meant treat the enemy with the same sense of the gift of life that you yourself want to be treated. It means not to love them like I love my wife or my sons and my grandchildren. It means rather that they are alive as we are alive, and we give them the possibility that they can discover the full possibilities of their own souls and their own minds. So I commend to you, in the spirit of John Lewis, nonviolent struggle, soul force, God force, love force, truth force, the force of the beauty of our species as a human race. It is the gift of life, and we can change ourselves and we can change our world if we use it. Do not allow yourself to become a part of the violence of our society, of the despising of some other human beings, whether they're next to you or whether they're 10,000 miles away. Do not allow yourself to in any way, if you despise other human beings, it comes from your despising yourself. John Lewis, as a student when I met him in 1958, was looking for the power that would give his life massive meaning and give his life massive work to do. And I know of no one who did it as well or as lovingly and cheerfully as did John Lewis. But one other sentence. We must think of this for a moment. In celebrating the John Lewis way, let us understand that the struggle is not even half over. We as a people cannot rid ourselves of racism, sexism, violence, plantation capitalism, which has taken 300 or 400 centuries, 300 or 400 years to become the horror that it has been for too many millions of us across the 300 years of our existence here in these states. It is the task is, as John said, that is larger than ourselves, will outlast our lives, perhaps many generations, as he suggests. But I urge you firmly, use the gift of love that is in you to continue the struggle to turn, in fact, our nation in the right direction, which in many ways we can call the John Lewis way. In my judgment, the task has only begun. And we've only tapped a small part of it. But I am convinced that if we continue following the kinds of examples that we've had in Nashville and elsewhere, and in John, many of us will not live to see it complete, but the struggle will go on and will continue to transform Nashville in our nation. And so there's a spirit that we need as never before. It's a spirit that I've found in Langston Hughes' poem, Mother the Sun. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I've been climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes turning in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down now on the steps 'cause you finds it kind of hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going on, honey. I's still climbing, and life for me has been no crystal stair. Let no one fall down. Let no one get tired. Let no one despise any other. But let us continue the march, the struggle. We'll get there.
question